but to invite you into somebody else's narrative. This is a podcast to give a voice to the neglected. It is also an opportunity for all of us to engage.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Neglected Podcast. My name is Nick Schultz. You can hit me up at Schultzy Time. You can hit us up at For the Neglected on social media. I'm here with my producer, Quinn. Thanks for being here and producing, Quinn. Thank you for City Church for hosting. And we have a very unique guest today that I'm excited about because you don't get to hear these kind of conversations too often. So just a quick little background about the person that I'm going to be talking to today. He is someone that our paths crossed in a very unique way for us. My wife and I were foster parents, and we got a call one day that changed our lives from DFACS. And when I say DFACS, that is short for the Department of Family and Children's Services. So when you hear that, that's what that means in this podcast. And my wife was 38 weeks pregnant, I believe, about to have our fourth boy in about 2 weeks. And we got a phone call from DFACS asking us if we wanted to take two girls into our care through foster care. And I was not expecting my wife to say yes, because I wouldn't if I was 38 weeks pregnant and about to have a fourth child come out of my body. And we were about to move again in another month because we were in a different home because of the Hurricane Matthew. So we had a lot going, and it was horrible timing, yet something God told my wife, hey, let's do this, even though it's crazy. And we did, and we took in two girls. And the guest that we have today is the biological father of those two girls. And his name is Dawayne Park. So Dawayne, thanks for being here, man.
Not a problem. Thanks
How
for
you
having
doing?
me. I'm good.
So very unique relationship. And we'll get into all of that and what that was like for you, what it was like for me, our family, your family. But first, let's get a little bit of a background of what it was like for you growing up. Where did you grow up? What was your family dynamic? And paint us a little picture of what life was like for you far back.
I'm the second of four boys. And
four boys, good.
My mom and dad were both in the military, so we were constantly moving around. I was born in Alabama, but I've lived in 38 out of 50 states. We've lived in Germany. My mom got out after 28 years. We were in Virginia, and that's where we've stayed at since then. I went in the Army 2007, and I was a military police officer, did 4.5 years, was deployed to Iraq in 2009, came back in 2010 with severe injuries to my lower back, my head, and my knee. I got medically discharged, went home, back up to Virginia back in 2011, and I worked odd and end jobs during the time I was off. Met my wife 2012, and then 2014 we got married, and in 2015 we were blessed with identical twin girls. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge life changer.
Yeah, I'll say so. As someone who has kids.
Yeah, definite blessing. Ended up finding a job down in Georgia, so we moved from Virginia to Georgia, and I was working there. I had a little rough patch at first, and all it did was just get worse and worse, to the point I ended up getting kicked out of the house, went back up to Virginia, and decided that, you know what, I'm not going to fight for custody of my kids, but I'm going to fight to stay in their life.
Gotcha.
Then there was some issues that led into my girls going into foster care, and I said, no, it's time for me to fight for my kids. And that's when I started the whole process of getting custody of them. I was awarded temporary custody, then they were taken from me because I was from out of state and put into foster care. And then was that following court date that I met you.
That's when our lives intersected. Yeah, man. Dude, that was a really good job of summing up your life story in like 3 minutes. That was impressive.
Well, it's basically your testimony. So when you give your testimony, you have 15 minutes roughly to give a testimony. So
all right, well, let's unpack all of that, because there's so much in everything you just shared there.
Mm-hmm.
But so what was that like for you growing up with your parents and moving that much? What did that do with you for life or friendship, or how did that mold you?
It wasn't until I got out of the Army that I actually had friends. Growing up, I had people that I hung out with, but I never really got close enough to call them a friend because I knew eventually I was
You're gone.
going to be gone,
Yeah.
and I didn't want that pain of moving away from my friends. So never really kept a whole lot of friends growing up.
It's interesting, man. Yeah, I can't imagine that. I moved like once or twice, and it was, as a kid for me, it was just traumatic because of the friendships.
Yeah.
But I could see how hard that would be for you. If like, you know, I can't get that close or allow myself to go there because I know I'm gone.
Yep.
I know I'm gone. And probably you're old enough too, where technology wasn't that great either, where you can,
No.
at that age, you can stay connected through video games or through social media or phones.
If I remember correctly, at that age, the original Xbox was just coming out, and the only smartphones they had were the flip phones. So
Yeah, I had one of those.
so there wasn't a whole lot of technology to keep in contact with people.
Was foster care ever visible to you, or did you know about it when you were younger with your family?
I grew up in it. My mom and dad were foster parents. My grandparents were foster parents. So I actually grew up in the foster care system, knowing some of it.
Right. And what'd you think? Like when you had other kids in the house who came from other families and homes, and what they went through, what did you think about those parents that couldn't take care of their kids necessarily, or the kids that came in? Did you understand it? And
Well, at that point, no, I didn't really fully understand it. I just knew that you got my brothers and I somewhat disciplined, and then you got these unruly kids that were coming in because of the lifestyle that they grew up in. They didn't know discipline. They didn't know the love of God in their life. They were abused. They were put into bad situations by people that were on stuff that didn't know any better because of the stuff that they were on. So when we got them, a lot of them were from bad environments.
Mhm.
So we ended up having to not only show them what the love of God was like and what a true love of family is, but we also had to get it to where they were disciplined, and that was the biggest hurdle out of all of it. But once all of that was cleaned up and we got it to where, as my mom likes to put it, true citizens of the U.S., not these hooligans, the blessings that came from that were tremendous. My grandmother passed away, and as I said, she was a foster parent. And in December of 2011, from the time I was born in Alabama till December of 2011, my grandmother was a foster mother.
Mm.
So from 87 to 2011, she foster cared kids, and there was over 1,000 kids that she fostered. And
did you say 1,000?
yeah, over 1,000. It was like, if I remember correctly, it's like 1,760 kids total.
That's insane.
Yeah, and
She needs an award or a Guinness Book or record or something.
but when she passed away, majority of those foster kids showed up for the funeral.
Wow.
Because my grandmother touched their lives in a way that most people wouldn't understand.
Wow. And how do you think having all those foster kids in your home, how did that touch you, or did you have issues with some of them? It was difficult at times, or like you appreciated your parents and your grandparents for doing it, or was it just like, oh man, this is kind of a hassle?
I appreciated my parents and my grandparents for doing it, but I think my mom and dad, when they finally stopped doing foster care, I was in the Army, and I came home for a weekend, and one of the kids that they had just was issue after issue. Nothing that we have done with all the other kids was working with this one.
Right.
And when I came home, he was constantly stealing. So as a military police officer, I was doing the Scare Straight program with him while I was home, and that still didn't even work.
Mm.
So, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's all rainbows and unicorns.
No, it's not.
Fostering
we'll
kids.
Talk about that.
Yeah, but you've got your very, very minimum select few that just get it in their mind that it's never going to change. They've been hurt their entire life. They're going to be hurt their entire life. And it was at that point that my mom said, I can't do it anymore, and stopped fostering. But I mean, for the majority of the amount of kids that have been come through my family through foster care, it's been a blessing.
Yeah. And part of that's the big fear of anybody has,
Yeah.
even talking about foster care. It's like, you say the word foster care and it's a impactful word, no matter what anybody thinks about it. It's like, heck no, not going to do it.
Yeah.
Sounds painful, sounds messy. There's a very small percentage of people who are like, yes, I'm all about that. I want to help out. But for the majority, people don't understand it and they don't want to get anywhere near it because of, especially when you have your own kids, which I'm a father and we've taken in foster kids. And that's the big thing. People are like, how does it affect your kids? What is it like for them? What if you get a kid who's like this and it's bad for your kid? It's like, there's a bunch of what ifs and there's a bunch of you don't know, and it's never going to change. They can tell you, hey, we know these certain things about these kids coming in, but they don't know everything. And it's just whether you feel called and have the love to take in the unknown and the mess. And
Yep.
I'm grateful that you've had a family lineage of people that have done that.
Well, I grew up with my dad always saying, don't live by what ifs. If you keep living by what ifs, you're going to live with have-nots.
That's good.
So if you want to live your life to the fullest for God, don't live by the what ifs, because in our minds, we can't fathom what God can. And the blessings that will come from not listening to the what ifs could give you the you have for the rest of your life. Because these blessings, watching these kids' lives change is a blessing that'll never go away.
Yeah, that's true, man. That's true. Well, obviously foster care is a big part of your life from then to even now. And we'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
But another big part of your family life, like you mentioned, was the military. Both of your parents were in the military, served a long time. And I'm assuming that's part of the reason you went in.
Yeah.
Was because you wanted to, or to carry on that tradition and
carry on the tradition. I come from a long, long line of military. My father, his father, his father, my mom, her father, his father, his father. I mean, we've traced our lineage back to the Revolutionary War. So
interesting. And explain a little bit more about when you got in the Army, what were your plans you want to do, and what did you end up doing before you got injured?
My plans going in was to do 20 years in the Army and collect a pension, retire from the Army as a military police officer, and then step into a line of work as a county police officer, something back home, and do 20 years there and retire, and then sit on the couch collecting 2 pensions. But that got ended when I was deployed to Iraq. I was tossed out of a 10-foot tall truck, hit the right side of my head on the top corner, fell 13 feet on the left side of my head, and had 475 pounds land on my lower back.
And you were doing what in the truck at the time? Why were you up there?
I was the gunner, so I'm half in, half out the truck to begin with. And this truck had no suspension, and my driver hit a bump at 55 miles an hour, which just sent me right out the top. I was med-flighted to Germany. And
you were unconscious?
Yeah, I was unconscious. They med-flighted me to Germany. When I woke up, they were trying to get me to walk again. It took 2 weeks, and I started walking. The doctor looked at me and told me at the age of 25, I'm going to be in a wheelchair.
And you were at what age then?
22. Okay. So that would have given me 3 years to enjoy my life without a wheelchair. And I looked at the doctor and I said, in 3 years, you're going to be amazed at the miracle that my God can work. And walked out. When they sent me back to Iraq to finish up my tour. When I came back to the States, they told me that by the age of 28, I was going to be in a wheelchair. And by that time, I was 23.
Are you still allowed to do the same things you were doing before after all this stuff happened?
Oh, yeah. I mean, before all of this happened, I was running 2 miles in 9.5 minutes. Now I'm running 2 miles in 10 minutes. So it only cut 30 seconds off my time. But I mean, I'm still knocking out push-ups, still do sit-ups. I train in karate with one of my kids. There's just a whole lot that they said I would never be able to do. And 25 and 28 were the age that they gave me. And here I am, 32 years old, still up moving around.
Man, so you're experiencing some crazy trauma. You're not even talking about the mental side of it yet either.
No.
Or, emotionally. you're seeing the world. You're going to Germany. You've lived in all these different states. You visited other countries when you were over there too.
Yeah.
What kind of perspective are you getting, just even from a cultural or people perspective, going to all these different countries, these different places, and everything you're experiencing in your early 20s, man?
I was over there seeing what the difference between our country and their countries are. And with our countries, we have a lot more, but we don't care as much as they do. They care a lot about the little things. And a lot of our people over here, they care only about the big things. So it's taught me to actually care for the little things, because their lives are so much happier over there. And here we are with a lot of people that are upset at the little things going wrong, when if you would just slow down and care about the little things, you'd have a much happier life.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what ultimately did you suffer, if anything, from the head trauma, from those experiences? Did you have PTSD, mental health things? Like what happened shortly thereafter, and where are you even now? Like, what's been that journey like?
I do still suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. I have an issue with sudden backfires from cars. If something just makes a loud clap of thunder or fireworks, they send me into a panic attack, because all of it just, if you actually think about it, all of it sounds like wartime sounds.
Right.
And so I was suffering from PTSD when I got back from Iraq. And one of the things that I did to try to solve that, it didn't really work, but I tried to self-medicate with alcohol. And it started off with a couple glasses, which, okay, but then it turned into, eventually I was doing 2 fifths of Jack a night, and I ended up having to be rushed to the emergency room one night because I had eventually pickled my pancreas in the 4 months that I was self-medicating with alcohol.
And you're doing this self-medication, was it strictly just because of the mental side of it, or was it also physical pain that you were doing?
Just the mental side of it. The physical pain, I've got a high pain tolerance, so I can break my arm and get up and go and get it fixed myself. But the biggest problem that I was suffering with was the mental side of it. It made it to where I forgot everything from before I was 16. Everything that I've been able to tell you from my childhood has been stuff that I've seen in home videos.
Really?
Or that my mom and dad has told me about my childhood. But I remember nothing from before the age of 16.
Really?
That's from the 2 major concussions. It's actually messed with my speech. There's occasions that I stutter. I have to actually stop and think about what I'm going to say before I say it, or I can't say it.
Yeah.
And so there's been a huge life change since February of 2010 with the way I think, the way I talk, and all of that it led me down this dark road. And it wasn't to the point where I just wanted to end it all, because I knew there was more to life than what I was having a problem with. It's just at that point in time, I didn't have somebody standing there telling me, hey, look, I understand this is what's going on, but let's try to figure this out together. It was just me at that time trying to take care of it all.
Do you think it was just you because you wanted it to be just you, or were there other people that you maybe could have went to that could have helped you, either whether it was professionally through the military maybe, or parents, friends? Obviously, you said you didn't have a lot of friends because you moved so much. Was it just like, I'm lonely and that's the way it is and I'm going to deal with it myself? Or what was that battle like?
The not wanting to let a whole lot of people into my life led to me being that lone wolf type person that I got to deal with it on my own. There's nothing that anybody's going to be able to say or do to help because they don't know me.
Right. When you keep bringing up just God and faith a little bit with what you're sharing and some of that, because you said, like, you told the doctors, you don't know what my God can do. So obviously you've had either grew up in the faith or you had it when you're in the military. Did your perspective of God or your relationship with him, did that change at all based on what you experienced, the pain, the trauma, and the loneliness and the drinking? What were your views going on during that time?
During that time, I actually stepped away. During the 4 months of the drinking, I stepped away from God completely. I stopped going to church, stopped reading my Bible, stopped praying. I cut it all out. And then the night that I was rushed to the emergency room, my NCO, who I would always go to church with, would sit there and we'd get into debates about what certain verses in the Bible meant. He ended up coming by to find out why I haven't been to church in so long, and he sees me low crawling in pain out to my truck. So he rushed me to the emergency room, and it was after when they were released, they were getting ready to discharge me from the emergency room. He showed up that day to bring me back to my barracks, and he handed me a Bible, and he's like, "Don't ever do that again. Everything you need is in this book. And if you ever need a shoulder to talk to or lean on, I'm right here. Don't ever do this to me again." So it was from that point that I actually got back into going to the church and reading my Bible and coming back to Christ and all of it.
Wow, it's pretty powerful, man. Yeah. And so from that moment of kind of, I guess, getting back on your faith journey, and how old were you then, in bridging the gap of when you got married and then the girls came on? You were still in Virginia and then you came down here to Savannah?
2010, I was still in the Army. I was 9 years younger, so 23.
Okay.
I was about 23 years old when all of that transpired. And 2011, December of 2011, I went back up to Virginia. My wife and I met while I was in the Army. And so we kept in communication while I was up in Virginia. She was down in Bloomingdale, Georgia. And 2014, we decided that we were going to take the relationship a little bit further. So she moved up to Virginia with her daughter, and we got married in 2014. Had the girls in 2015, and like I said, that was a blessing, but also it led into a little bit more issues, because at the time, one of the things that I've always done is I've tried to live saving money. So part of that was, instead of living on my own out in the house, paying all this money for this house, I stayed at my mom and dad's, and I paid part of the utilities and the rent there. I paid them rent for their mortgage. So we always help each other out in my family. So that's one of the things that I've always done. So staying at my mom and dad's, just me, didn't change anything. But when having myself, my wife, and 3 kids at my mom and dad's,
That's a lot, man.
It made it a little bit harder. So I started branching out for a better job. And that's when I found a job down here in Rincon. And we moved down to Bloomingdale, and that's where we were staying at while I was working out in Rincon.
Gotcha. And then how soon after that, you had the girls in Virginia,
Right.
and then you all moved down here?
Yeah, it was March of 2015 that the girls were born, and then it was January of 2016 that we moved to Georgia.
Okay. Cool. Well, before we segue into kind of how you and I cross paths, what was being a father like for you? What did it meet your expectations? Was it a lot different? How much, especially just with some of the things you experienced a lot of traumatic things. And what was it like still maybe dealing with some of that stuff while you were a father?
The traumatic stuff actually made it harder on me being a father. One of the whole reason I got kicked out of the house and had to move back up to Virginia is because it was 4th of July weekend, July of 2016. And I was sitting outside playing around with the girls out in the backyard, out having a barbecue, and not thinking anything about it when the neighbor starts shooting off fireworks. I instantly went into a panic attack, and I snatched up both my kids and started running to get somewhere behind cover, because in my mind I was in a combat zone. And at that point, I was not seeking the help that I needed for my PTSD. I was just bottling it up. And my wife said, you can't do this around the kids. You've got to go until you can get yourself taken care of. So I came back up to Virginia in July of 2016. And then it was about November of 2016 that we decided that it was time to part ways. She had found somebody else. She didn't want to try to save the relationship. So we put in the paperwork with the understanding that both of us agreed to the divorce, but neither one of us agreed to who was getting the kids. I said that she could have them, just I get every other holiday. I mean, typical custodial parent type stuff. And it was February of 2017 or January of 2017 that I got a phone call saying that my daughter was in the hospital. So I came down to figure out what was going on, because first day it's your daughter's in the hospital. Second day it's your daughter's in the hospital and DFACS is getting involved.
Right. Yeah.
And as a military police officer in Georgia, I've dealt with DFACS on a personal level, and I don't like them. They've got too much freedom and nobody challenges them. I mean, I know from every foster care system that I've been party to, which is Alabama and Virginia, if there's an allegation made, just an allegation made against the family, the Child Protective Services will do an investigation. If an investigation is unfounded, they leave the family alone. That's it. If it's founded, then they take the child and put them into foster care and try to get the problem fixed. From everything I've seen with Chatham County, you call and make an allegation against the family, DFACS steps in, they snatch the kids, put them into foster care, and then do their investigation, which could take 3 to 5 months. So a lot of these kids in Chatham County don't even need to be in the foster care system. These are just false allegations made against the family that they're having to suffer with it for 3 to 5 months, not having their kids.
Yeah. So obviously you did not enter into a personal relationship with DFACS on a good note, and you're in a different state.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of where you and I intersect a little bit, and we're not going to get into the details of what happened to your daughters or who did what or anything like that. But what I can say for you is that, you didn't cause them any harm. Right. You were in Virginia, you were not near them, and I'm not going to go anywhere else besides that, because it's just you here right now, and you weren't there. And your girl's in her foster care with you being in a different state, which that alone is, again, another traumatic experience.
Especially since I had them. I had them before they went into foster care.
Right.
I was given custody of them straight out of the hospital. And then a month and a half later, they're put in foster care because I'm from out of state.
Mm-hmm. And your daughters, too, they have certain health issues, which we don't have to get into all those as well, but they were at least, preemies, and, they had certain health things that needed to be taken care of through their lives when they were growing up as well. And so that's a tough spot to be in. And, we end up getting a call. I guess this is where I enter the story, but we end up getting a call, I believe, can't even remember what it was, March or April or something, because their birthdays are in.
It's March.
We get a call, and like I said before, my wife is 38 weeks pregnant. We complete all of our foster care training. Our home is certified and we're open, and we haven't had a placement yet. And with DFACS as well, if you don't get a placement before my wife gives birth, we'd have to wait another 6 months, because they don't give someone a child who has another child that's under 6 months, because of how much care that takes.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. So here we were waiting a couple months. We're like, man, I guess they're not going to give us a call. And the closer we're getting to my wife having a baby, it's like, and I don't think we want to call, because it's going to get a little crazy. And so we didn't think we were going to get one. And then, I'm working. She gives me a call and is like, they just called me. And they've got twin girls, they're toddler age. I was like, holy cow. One, I've only had boys, so I don't even know what to do with girls in the first place. And I am assuming my wife is going to say no. If I was in her shoes, I probably would have said no. But she said, this makes no sense. And it's a horrible decision probably, and no one's going to understand it, but I think we're supposed to do it. I was like, I do too, but I can't believe you just said that.
Well, I'm glad y'all did.
Well, I appreciate that. And so we did. And, from our side of it, we just get a call. We say yes based on the limited information they tell us. And within 2 hours, your daughters were being pulled up into a car at our door within 2 hours with just whatever stuff they had on them. And that's how they entered into our world and just kind of wrecked it in a beautiful way. Because you can't, you can do all the training, but you can't prepare for something like that.
No, and they would have had more if I lived here in Virginia, because I don't send them with less than, what that could send them with, that was just the bare minimum. I just had that because we traveled from Virginia down to Georgia.
Yeah, it's just all you had.
Yeah, it's all I brought with them.
And so let's kind of bounce back and forth, because I think it's going to be really important, interesting for people that are watching and listening to get perspective of the foster care system and the kids that enter it, but also from both sides of it. You're the biological father of these girls who got taken away from you, and we are the foster parents who took in your daughters. And there's a lot of emotional things that are going on from both sides. And I always tell people, as hard as fostering is, it can't be harder than what you're dealing with. There's no way that I'm going to experience more emotional hurt than you are having your kids taken away, if you love them and you really want them. You know what I mean? There's some people that don't, but that wasn't your case. And so what was that like for you when, you don't have to give all the details, but just when you found out that you were going to have to give them up and you were going to have to do things on your end in a different state to even get them back, and you weren't going to be able to take care of them?
I actually had two things running through my mind. To begin all of it, when my heart just sank and it was shattered into pieces when they told me I had to drop them off with defects because they were going to foster care. And the two things that were going through my mind, drop them off at defects and just pray and be in the Word, or quickly load these kids up and run and never look back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I did the first one. So I actually took them to the defects office, and I looked at the lady and I was like, look, my kids aren't going anywhere without me praying over top of them first. And she was like, well, they've got to go. And I was like, you can wait for like a couple seconds for me to say a prayer. She was like, no, they've got to go. And I was like, look, just please let me have this one thing. You're taking my kids from me. So finally she reluctantly let me pray over top of them. And I prayed for them, and they walked away. And the hardest part of all of that was not the handing my kids over to somebody. It was watching my kids fight while they had two people carrying them away, and these two girls were fighting and crying and screaming out for me. And there was nothing I could do.
Mm-hmm. And I think you told me before, because I asked you, it's like, compare that moment and that pain for you compared to the worst physical pain, which might have been what happened in Iraq and maybe in your drinking. And what did you tell me?
That pain was the worst pain I've ever been in. Even with all the problems that I had in Iraq, all the medical issues that I've abstained from that, me losing the girls that day was the hardest pain I've ever been through.
Mm-hmm. So what is that like? What do you do with that pain? What do you do with it in that moment? I'm sure you're just numb, you're devastated. What do you do that next hour, that next day, that next week? Like, how do you even function or do anything?
There's always different ways people handle it. The way I handled it was I turned that pain and that anger, and I took it and turned it into fuel to fight, to really fuel the fire to actually fight every day for my kids. There was not a day that went by that I did not do something to fight for my kids. And it turned into, I actually acquired a huge amount of debt because of it, but I stopped paying most of my bills just so I could be down here every Friday with them. I'm just now getting to the point where all of that's covered and paid in full, but it hurt me financially, hurt me credit-wise for the longest time,
mm-hmm.
because of the year and a half of fighting for him and coming down to see him every Friday. But I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah. And when you say coming down, You are driving down in the middle of the night from Virginia, not Savannah,
No, from Virginia.
for Virginia, all the way through the night to get down here for a
4 hour
four-hour visit
Yeah.
at the defects office in just like a room that is not super kid-friendly or fun to be in.
No, it's not. They
And
had
then go right back after that.
Yeah, it was 8 hours. I'd leave out 11 o'clock at night Thursday, drive my 8 hours to get down here. I'd get down here roughly 6 or 7, depending on traffic. So, I mean, I say 8 hours. It's supposed to be 8 hours, but I got a lead foot. So I do like 5 over the speed limit. And I'd get down here about 6 or 7, lay my seat back, take a nap, set my alarm, take a nap. 9:45, I'd get up. I'd go in, sign in at the defects office, go in, spend 4 hours with the girls, get back in the car and drive back home. And that's the longest part of it, was the drive back home, because that pain that I felt the day I dropped them off, I felt that every Friday night going home.
Yeah, I bet.
So, I mean, it felt like the ride took even longer, because I'd hit the road at 2:30 and I wouldn't get home until about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much here to unpack. And, one of the things that people that don't understand foster care and just know it from far away is that they assume there's a hero, there's a villain, and there's a victim in it. Yeah. And for some of us, it's like, well, the foster parents are always the hero. The biological parents are the villain. The kids are always the victim. Or sometimes from a different perspective, it's defects is the villain. And sometimes the biological parents are the victim. And what I tell people is, like, every situation is different. And to assume what's going on, you don't. And that's part of the mess of being involved in it. It's not that simple. It's not that cut and dry. Just because someone's kids even go into foster care, don't assume the worst, or this father did something to harm his kids. And that's also a battle on, even my end or a foster parent's end, where it's, okay, we got these girls, we heard this about them. And then all of a sudden you have stuff going through your head, and it's a battle to say, you know what? They're a parent. I'm a parent, especially you, because one of the things that we were hoping for and praying for is we got into foster care because we want family reunification. Yeah. And that's really the goal of foster care. And some people get in it thinking, I'm going to adopt, or I'm going to take kids out of their bad situation with their biological parents, and I'm going to get custody of them and rescue them. It becomes a rescue thing sometimes. Yeah. And that's not the goal of defects, and that wasn't ours. And I always wanted a relationship with you, but I didn't even know who you were yet.
It's not actually the goal of foster care. The goal of foster care is reunification with the parents. It's just with how everybody's mindset goes when it comes to foster care, they automatically go to that, I'm going to rescue the kids, or I'm going to adopt the kids. And you can't go into it like that, because you're going to end up getting hurt in the long run, as well as hurting the kids in the long run.
Yeah. And then from our perspective, it was insane to take in 2 toddler girls in the family situation we had with, at the time, 3 boys. And then 2 weeks later, my wife gives birth to another boy, and we've got 4 kids under 4, changing 4 diapers, and it's just chaos. Yeah. And but our story is part of the reason we survived is because we had people from our church, friends, family. We had a bunch of people help us. So our goal is to support your girls and reunify them with you, and support you as well if you were going to allow me to have a relationship with you. But we needed support from other people to be able to do that. Because at the time, we're thinking, probably like you're thinking, because you hear people telling you this, lawyers and case workers, and this is probably looking like a 6-month thing. Yeah. It wasn't a 6-month thing. No. It was a 1.5 years. Yeah. And if they would have told us it was going to be a 1.5 years, we would have been like, I don't think we can do this. So it's good they didn't tell us that, because you're out of state, you're a veteran, and so there's different things that you have to go through that normally don't happen if the parent is in the same state, same county, not going through the VA. There was extra messiness that you had to work through and fight through to get them back. And I did want to ask you, what was your perspective of, you knew you were probably going to meet me or my wife in court for that first time, where we were going to be together and you were going to meet the people that were taking care of your kids, what was your mindset going into it? What was your expectations? What did you want to see? What were you scared of?
Well, my expectations were exceeded. I'll go ahead and say that. I've growing up and dealing with the foster care system from an outside perspective, I've seen more families that don't really care about the child. They're just there to collect the money for taking in the child. And I didn't see that when you came in. I saw somebody that actually cared for the girls. I saw somebody that was actually focused on the girls, not just, well, I'm here because I'm told to be here. But you were actually there because you wanted to be there for the girls. And that's what made it a whole lot easier on me, because my fear going into it is that my girls are going to be in a home where they're not loved, they're not cared for, they're mistreated. And that was my expectations. The bar was low, and you raised that bar and exceeded what my expectations were. And it actually put a sense of relief and a sense of peace over me. For that year and a half, instead of focusing on two fronts, I could focus on one. So instead of focusing on trying to make sure my kids were taken care of in the home that they were in and fighting for custody of my kids, you took that fight completely out of making sure my kids were taken care of because you were taking care of them. So I was able to focus all of my attention to getting custody of my kids. And that was the biggest support that I could ever have, was having you guys as the foster parents, having a godly family as the foster parents.
Well, thanks. It wasn't easy, but we tried.
Yeah.
We tried. And was it important for you to have any kind of relationship with me or me and my wife, or was it just strictly, I just need to know you're taking care of him? Was that like a cherry on top that like, hey, this guy, maybe him and I will have kind of relationship, it'll tell me more things than he needs to tell me? Or was it?
Oh yeah, that was the cherry on top. I just needed to know my girls were safe.
Right.
That's all I needed to know. And then we started forming this relationship, and it wasn't just with you and your wife. I mean, even the respite homes. Mm-hmm. I was forming relationships with everybody that was dealing with my kids, and it's not like I was out trying to form those relationships. It was just happening. I'd show up for visitation, and then after visitation, I'm like, hey, they come up to me, hey, you want to go to the beach with the girls? And it's like, I don't want anything negative coming against me or the girls. So as much as I would love to go to the beach with my kids, I'm going to have to turn it down. Plus, I got to get home. So, I mean, there was a lot that I've never actually had to deal with on a personal level, as far as the relationships being formed without any effort.
Yeah, that's really encouraging for me to hear, because it wasn't just important for us to support you and love your girls, but to build a bigger network of people around you and them that care for you and want you to get back together, like the respite family, like the people that are teaching your girls at church, or all the people that are coming to give us meals and help us out with homework and do all these things that we don't have time for, but they're doing it because they're also for the girls and for you. And that's really exciting for me to hear, that you saw it and you felt that, like everybody that was at least connected to us was for you. And that's gotta be, like you said before, a relief and peace. And it's just got to feel a whole lot better when the whole situation can feel depressing.
Yeah, very much so.
And I remember I'd FaceTime with your mom a couple times a month, and you'd be on there sometimes too, so that they could see the girls. And one of the intricate parts of doing this too is figuring out boundaries of legally. Okay, we can't just tell him our address and tell him all this stuff and these things. It has nothing to do with fear of you're going to do something crazy, but it's just, you have defects and caseworkers telling you, take things slow.
Yeah.
And probably on your side too, it's like you said before, you don't want to mess anything up case-wise where, hey, I got invited to go to the beach with my girls, but I actually wasn't allowed to do that, or it looked down upon. I should wait until this test comes through about this. And so there's so many levels of, you don't want to mess it up, because it can knock you another 3 months backwards if you do something.
And that's the problem I was running into. I was like getting all these invites to go do stuff with the girls in the respite homes. And I'm like, I want to, but I'm not wanting to push this case back a little further.
Mm-hmm. So all that was a delicate kind of balancing act. And, a year and a half later, you finally do get that chance to take them and get them back. And, what was, besides the initial moment where they got taken from you, what was kind of the hardest time where you had to push through? Like, I know I can get my girls back, but where was it just like, I feel like I'm stuck, I'm in a rut, things aren't moving, or I'm just mentally exhausted with this? Do you remember a moment where it was a struggle for you?
No, it never really was a struggle for me in that aspect. It did get to a point where towards the beginning of 2018, I believe it was, that I got the girls back. Yeah, it was towards the beginning of 2018. I got them back in August 2018. Towards the beginning of it, I kept feeling this nudge on my heart to go ahead and just set the room up for the girls. And so I got toddler beds and I got all these toys and all this furniture and set the room up as if they were coming home. Mm-hmm. And that made it a little bit harder than what it was. But I mean, it wasn't to the point where I didn't think it was ever going to end. It was just every time I walked past the room, knowing that it's set up for them and they're not there. And then it got to the point where I woke up one day and I had enough money to pay for my family and I and the girls to go to the Bahamas. And I get a call from my attorney and says August 9th is the deciding date on what we're doing with the girls. They will no longer be in foster care as of August 9th. They're either going with you or with your wife. And I was sitting there, I was like, all right, Lord, you show me what it is you want me to do. And my mom came up and said, well, we really want to go to the Bahamas as a family. And I was like, but I want to make it a celebratory thing. And she's like, what? And I was like, I want to pay for this trip to the Bahamas as a celebratory thing, saying I got custody of my kids. God granted me that custody. And so we're going to take a trip to the Bahamas. So we scheduled the trip to the Bahamas the end of August. And my mom kept saying, you're not 100% positive you're getting the girls. And I was like, through God, I am. I know without a shadow of doubt that I'm getting the girls August 9th. So we get into court August 9th, and lo and behold, my parents and I walk out of court August 9th with the girls. And so we took them as a celebratory thing for that, and that portion of court being over with, to the Bahamas. Just took a cruise.
That's really cool. And we were planning on you getting them that day too, because we gave you everything we had to take in certain trips to go back with them. And just from an honest perspective, our family was ready. That was a long period of time to have someone else's kids, and ours were young, and it was a grind, man. It was a real grind. It doesn't mean it was anything compared to what you were going through not having them, but for us, we were ready for a break. Not because we didn't care for them or love them, but we were ready for you to have your girls back. We were ready for us to just take a deep breath and take a break before we took in more kids, because it was hard on us. Yeah. Not because of the girls doing something. It's just it's a life changer.
6 kids in one house.
Yeah.
4 of them close to the same age.
I start shaking when you even say that number, but so we were thankful. And the hard part for us was they went to a respite home. Yeah. And we weren't going to see them. I wasn't going to be able to personally be there with you at court when you were finally going to get to take them. My wife and I already had a trip to Rwanda. We were helping lead a team there. And we actually flew back. The day we were going to get back on the plane was that Friday the 9th, but that was the same day you were leaving. Yeah. But man, we were pumped that it all worked out and you got to take them, and it was a weird feeling for us too, to come home and only have 4 boys and not 2 girls in the house. But you and I have been able to stay in touch.
Oh yeah.
And you give us updates. You and I talk, and what was it like post getting the girls? When you got them, you drove back home and you entered that new life where you finally had your daughters back.
It was a sense of peace. I was finally able to relax after fighting for so long to get my kids. I was wore out. I mean, I was out of energy, and a lot of people don't understand it, that traveling 16 hours in 24-hour time frame and the constant fighting in court for something, anything, even if it's just a constant going to court over a lawsuit, just that constant court date, the constant fighting and the constant traveling. It's just, I was wore out. I was beat. I felt like I had no energy left. And then I get custody of my kids, and I'm the one driving home. My mom and dad were riding in my dad's truck, and I'm the one driving the truck home. And we get back to the house, and I felt energized and at peace. Got the girls in the house, laid them down in their beds. That was hard. They were super excited about their brand new beds. They couldn't even hold in the excitement. They were just bouncing all over the house, but finally got them laid down. And that following morning, I've never been one for bright sunrises early morning. I'm like, blinds closed. I get up at 6 every morning anyways, but the blinds are closed. And this morning, the girls come running into the room, and they rip open the curtains. They're like, "Daddy, it's morning time." And the sun's just barely over the horizon. I'm like, why are you up? So it was that whole stepping into that new old life, if you will. I've had the girls, but it was new to have them where I'm not having to go and pull them out of a crib. And they're now running around. They're saying a few words. But for the most part, there was a level of discipline there that completely took me by surprise. And to have them back was just a blessing again. So these girls have blessed me more than I could have imagined. And knowing that they're happy is all that I needed. That's all I needed to know, is that they are happy. And that whole beat down and out of energy and not wanting to fight anymore, just re-energized and picked back up. And God's like, look, this is everything you fought for. Continue to fight. And that's what I've been doing. That's why I got one more court date and it's done.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like for your girls? Did you notice anything? Did they just like go right back into life as like life with daddy? Was there, because they were in somebody else's home our home for a year and a half, and it's not, I'm guaranteed they weren't like begging, I want to go back there or anything, but was there I don't know, how did they handle the transition from being away in somebody else's home for a year and a half to finally being back with their family?
I think they handled it pretty well. When they got back up there, it wasn't, oh, well, they call you Daddy Nick. So it's not like they were sitting there saying, well, Daddy Nick let us do it this way. It was immediate. If I told them not to do something, they didn't do it. And I mean, it's as if nothing ever changed. They were just happy to be back in Daddy's house. They were happy to be back with Daddy. They loved being with y'all, but they were so happy finally coming home.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't like there was a huge life change. You guys took them to church every Sunday. I take them to church every Sunday. I take them to church every Wednesday night. Now we're homeschooling. So, I mean, there's a couple things that are different, but for the most part, they've picked up on being back at Daddy's house. That first few days, it was, the biggest problem was getting the girls to go to somebody of the female gender. Going up to a man, as long as Daddy said it was okay, it was okay. Going up to a female, even if Daddy said it was okay, it was a fight.
Gotcha.
So we had ended up having to break them of that habit. And part of the way that we did that is taking them to church every Sunday and getting them around these other people. And now they just, if they see somebody they like, they run from my side and run over to them and give them a hug.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they've opened up a lot since all of this has transpired.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so when you say, because you mentioned discipline, it was more like we were enough on the same page where we weren't battling each other with how to raise them up.
right.
Where you would get them for 4 hours and you're like, oh gosh, they're nothing like I want them to be like and be raised like this. You're not trying to reprogram them.
Right.
I'm for you, and we have the same, at least same kind of faith and same kind of, we want them to act this way, be respectful this way. No means no.
Yeah.
Timeout is a real thing if you don't listen kind of stuff. And, on our end, that's really great too, because it's like, it's hard on our family, but then if they if the foster kid spends 4 hours with the dad, or goes spends a weekend with the dad and comes back, and it's a completely different lifestyle where they get to do whatever they want, or they teach something different, then they're constantly going back and forth between these two expectations. And that's what I think you and I bonded really well. How we could appreciate that we're for each other and we're for getting them back to you, but we're also trying to be consistent with how you ultimately want them to be raised, and it lines up with just how we naturally were able to do that in our family. And that's not always the case.
No.
And so it really isn't. And that's, again, part of the messiness in all of it. But we're thankful that had a relationship with you, we're able to take the girls, and we're able to work together for the betterment for them and for you getting them back to where they needed to be.
Oh, yeah, because the biggest concern is the child.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever child it may be that's in foster care, they're the biggest concern. It's not the foster parent or the biological parent. It's the child. The child is the one hurting the most because they don't understand as much as the adults do. And so that's where my concern was their safety, not my own.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I realized that their safety was covered, that's when I was able to go and do more with less. So knowing that they were in a godly environment and they were learning that biblical discipline just made it a whole lot easier. And it also made it extra easier getting back into that lifestyle of being the parent that's always there with the child. Because instead of having 2 4-year-olds running around the house tearing everything up, they came up there, and it took a while to get them to come out of their room. That was their safe zone. And still playing around, that's their safe zone. Their uncle will chase them around the house, and they'll run in the room and can't touch me. I'm in my room. So, I mean, their room has always been their safe zone. And they've now gotten it to where, Daddy, you're my hero. And that's all I hear. Daddy, you're my hero. You're my hero every day. And it's like that's a touching statement. And I don't think they understand how much that I love hearing that. Because fighting for them for 1.5 years changed their life. And they realize that Daddy's going to go to war and back for them. And that no matter what, and it's not just the foster care system that I've had down in Georgia that I've had to fight for them with. Down here, it's called DFACS. Up in Virginia, it's called Child Protective Services, or CPS. I've had to fight with CPS on 2 separate occasions since I've gotten them back.
So it's not over.
No.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's going to be an ongoing battle, because one of the things that this nation is not used to is a single father with custody of their kids. It's not common. And so they want to do more research on it. And it's like, no, you leave my family alone. We've been through enough. But, I mean, I've been working with another group dealing with all of this, but they're worldwide, not just here in the U.S. And I don't have the book anymore, but I wrote a book in college on the effects of parental alienation on the psyche of a child. And that book is being handed out to single fathers worldwide. And I'm trying to get them to understand they need to give it to the mothers too, because any parent can alienate a child. So the whole fact of them going into foster care with y'all, and then y'all not alienating me from them or them from me, is what also eventually ended up making it a whole lot better. Because that's one of the biggest problems that I also see with foster care, is that fear of, well, I don't want to go any further than what defects or what the foster care system says that I can do. So we're not going to video with the parents. Well, you're essentially somewhat alienating that child from the parents.
Mm-hmm.
This child has no clue what's going on. So alienating them from them actually hurts them mentally. Then if you would just say, you know what, I don't have to show them everything. They're in their room. Everything's fine. You can video. Certain questions are not to be asked. Certain things are not to be made statements of. I hear them, video ends.
Yep.
And that's what we did at first. You and I videoed with, you and my mom videoed at first. And then I would be there, and not once did we bring up anything dealing with the case. Not once did we bring up anything dealing about where you live at or anything. It was just spending time with the kids. And knowing to go about it that way made it to where these kids weren't being hurt mentally.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this a whole lot easier, is if we can get more people involved in the system that isn't going to look at it of, well, I can't video with the family. Yeah, you can. Just
be smart about
be
it.
smart about it.
Yeah. It's good, man. And, I want to say from our perspective, it was not easy.
No.
And that has nothing to do. It's not a knock against you, the girls, the system. It's just everything, because again, it's a mess, and it's your choice to do it. We are choosing to invite chaos, mess, and people into our lives and into our personal space and our home, in our families, our kids' lives.
Yeah.
That you don't have to. And I don't blame people, and I understand why people don't want to do it. But at the same time, at least with what we believe and how God has created us and how he wants us to take care of other people, there's got to be people that have to do it.
Yeah.
And you looked up the numbers before, but just here in Chatham County where we live, you said there's like 474.
There's Chatham County is in a region, and in that region is 9 counties. Out of that 9 counties is 976 kids in the foster care system in those 9 counties. In Chatham County alone, there's 474 of those 976 in foster care in Chatham County, with only 38 homes in Chatham County. 38 foster homes for 474 kids.
And then people ask, well, what happens to those kids? They try to send them with family members, but a lot of kids could go in a group home, and a lot of kids can end up going into different counties, different cities. They can go to Atlanta to different homes, and then
And group homes are group homes are not where you want these kids to be at.
But ultimately, if they go somewhere different than the school they're already at, where they're away from what they're already used to, it again strips another form of identity and comfort from them, and it messes up kids even worse, where they're taken away from everything.
Yeah.
And we've always believed in that it's really the church's responsibility to take care of it, not the government's.
Well, it's biblical.
And exactly right. And that's kind of what our beliefs are. That's why we personally do it. It's because we're supposed to. I don't think anything bad of anybody that doesn't want to. But I always tell people, like, you can be involved in some way. The people that were supporting us, that helped us do laundry, that helped watch kids while we took your girls to a doctor's appointment, or so I could go to a court case and see with them, be supportive with them instead of getting picked up by somebody else.
Yeah.
Somebody else is helping us do something else or get us a meal that night. And that all ultimately is helping you. It's helping the girls, but it's playing a role.
Yeah.
Because you could get 474 homes, but if they don't have people supporting them, then they're gonna flame out.
Yeah.
And burn down. And so it really takes everybody, and everybody has a role they can do, even if you think it's small, like, it helps.
Yep. Even if you just sit there and pray for them,
sure,
that helps. I mean, that's one of the biggest things you could do for a foster family is pray for them.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's a good way to kind of segue as we wind down here. But one of the cool things too, and we don't have a lot of time to fully get into it, but you're a guy that you want to give back to. You're not just, and I think you're a guy that wants to give back regardless if your girls went into foster care or not. But I think that's also motivated you as well, to help other people. And so, just quickly, you're a part of a biker kind of group at church that is helping out orphans and widows, and it's your goal too to really help out how you've been helped out. And what does that look like, at least right now, what you're trying to do in Virginia?
Right now we're having, most of what I do is with child abuse up there, because that's the biggest area that needs the most help. And I ride with a section of Bikers Against Child Abuse, and we go there, and you got a child who's afraid of their parent for the abuse, and they're supposed to testify against them. Well, if you're afraid of who you're testifying against, you're not going to get up there on the stand and testify.
Mm-hmm.
So we go there, and we're basically the strength that they need to get up there and testify about the abuse. And so we've helped out a good bit of kids up there in Virginia, but I've started getting away from just Virginia, and you opened up the door for me to come down here and help out where I could down here. But I'm also I'm getting ready to go up to Maryland. There's a Hattiesburg, Maryland. It's a prison town, and all of the houses in that town are group homes, and that's why I don't really see any good things with group homes, because a lot of the problems that we're dealing with is they're being neglected in these group homes. So that's one of the things I'm going up to deal with, is the neglect in these group homes, trying to get more people involved up there in caring for these kids, supplying them with what they need. Right now it's just a tiny little church that's trying to do all of it, and they're running out of energy with it. So going up there to help out with that, and possibly going nationwide to start helping out with a lot of these foster care systems, getting more people involved, getting these kids better coverage and everything.
Well, you definitely have a good perspective on it, growing up, being a home that was taking them in, then having to deal with it as an adult on the other side, which you never wanted to be on.
Yeah.
But then ultimately kind of coming full circle and giving back and helping out. I think that's really cool. And as we wrap up here, we always ask people, what is the takeaway? What is the challenge we have our guests do to somebody? But really we try to challenge people not in like a systemic way. It's like, oh, what could our government do? What could our local DFACs do? What could the church do? Like individually, for someone that is listening personally right now to this podcast or watching it, I'm just an ordinary guy, ordinary woman. And what could I do to help someone that has experienced what you have in life? Like, how could they just get involved? How could they do something simple out of their comfort zone a little bit that would make a big difference after hearing all this?
The biggest thing, like I said, is prayer. But to actually physically give something back, like your church has done for you. You've got somebody that comes out and cuts the grass. You had somebody come out and cut the grass when you had the girls there. That because it's just time consuming dealing with 4 kids under the age of 4, that you didn't really have time to get out there and cut the grass. So somebody from the church came out and cut your grass. Somebody came out and supplied a meal for the day, or helped you with the kids with their homework. Just some way. One of the ways that, for an example, like what I do up in Virginia, one of the ways that I give back to my community for everything that they've helped me out with going through all of this is I go out and my town calls me up and says, hey, look, we got this lady here. She's got a broke down vehicle in the front yard. She's got 30 days to get it out of the way. So I'll go down there, and it ends up being either a widow or a single mother who just is down on her luck. And I'll look at the vehicle and be like, okay, that's something simple. I'll run down, get the part, come back, fix her vehicle up. She can now drive it, and she gets it out of the way. So it keeps her from getting a $500 fine, but it also, in the long run, helps her out, because now she can, if it's a single mother, now she can transport her kids where she needs to transport them to.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's just give back to those in need. Don't sit there and say, well, they're in need, but are they really in need because they made this mistake? Don't worry about the mistake they made, because the helping hand you give could change the mistake they made and change their life for the better.
Yeah.
So,
yep, that's really good. Well, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you being down here. This is a unique thing that I don't think is necessarily easy to do, for you to share this kind of stuff. And I don't want to pretend like we had an easy year and a half. Like, us personally as a family was super difficult. For you as individually is difficult, everything you're dealing with, and us trying to navigate that water together in different spots, but come together. It just wasn't easy at all.
No.
And yet I appreciate you for doing it. And I appreciate really, I could always tell how much you love the girls from the first time we met in the court. So when you say, hey, I met you and I was at peace, you know, for me, there was a certain sense of peace because when I saw the girls with you, I knew how much they loved their daddy. And I knew how much you loved them. Regardless of what else I knew about the case, what I knew about you as a person, what you went through, I knew nothing. But there's certain things that you can tell in kids' reactions.
Yeah.
And a parent, because I've worked with kids and parents for a long time. And so that part of it was peaceful for me. It's like, I know I'm going to work with somebody that really cares and wants them back. And that's not always the case. We've had other placements and kids, and, you know, every story is different and there's no guarantees on how it's going to end.
Yeah.
But it was tough on both sides. And yet here we are, and I'm happy with where your girls are at and thankful, and appreciate you being willing to come down here and talk about things that most people don't even want to talk about. But sharing your story like that, I think, is going to be really helpful for other people to hear.
Yeah.
Regardless if their kid ever gets taken into foster care, some custody, but just even how they could help someone that's went through what you've went through, or help someone like us who is helping.
Yeah.
That both sides are just as important.
Oh yeah, because they don't. A lot of people don't understand it is a financial problem, fostering and fighting for your child who's in foster care. So I mean, it hurts everybody involved in more ways than one. So I mean, just having that support for everybody involved is just tremendous help.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Dwayne, appreciate you being here, man. Appreciate your friendship. Love you and your girls, and looking forward to seeing them again sometime. We'll probably FaceTime them after this and check up on them. And thanks for being here at the Neglected Podcast. You can reach us at For the Neglected on Facebook and Instagram. And to watch or listen, it's just search The Neglected. Other than that, man, Quinn, thanks for producing. City Church, thanks for hosting. And this has been Nick Schultz. Thanks, and we'll catch you again another time. Peace.